Tony Chopper. The straw hat who in post time skip looked uglier, does nothing, and is considered as a fraud by many of the straw hat community. Now, I'm not really here to refute any of those claims. I don't really care if you really believe that he's trash or a good character or not. To me, he's kind of more like merch right now. But I love what he stood for in his flashback and his introduction arc in Drum Island. I feel like in Fishman Island, Chopper was kind of a character who was just delegated to the background and was just kind of showcasing his different abilities, like Monster Point, having controlled it, his different forms. And I feel like that was cool and all. I feel like that fact that Chopper had so much roots in discrimination by humans should have played a part into the Fishman Island arc's larger themes of oppression, of discrimination, and racism. I mean, if we look back to Chopper's introduction arc in Drum Island, as a little child, he was rejected by his herd and his family off his blue nose. And then later on, when he ate the human devil fruit, he was outright kicked out from the group because of his odd appearance. And so, after having been kicked out from the only family that he's ever known, he tried meeting up with some humans. And then later on, was called a monster, got rocks thrown at him, and even was shot at, right? And there was a level of trauma there because we see that when he met Dr. Hiraluk when he was injured, Dr. Hiraluk pulled out a pistol and laid it next to his briefcase, I believe. And Chopper, having associated guns being a danger to him, outright just punched Dr. Hiraluk, right? It's kind of the earliest sign for Chopper's trauma and his insecurity of his appearance. That many fishmen, I mean, even just going to the surface, have to hide themselves, right? Hide Hachi having to hide his arms, mermaids having to hide their fins, in order not to be pursued or enslaved potentially. I feel like in Drum Island there was two aspects that were heavily highlighted for Chopper's character. One of them was being his insecurity. Several points in that arc, he would state features that he did not like about himself or that he thought disgusted other people, such as his blue nose or his odd appearance, being able to talk. He would list those reasons to the Straw Hats as kind of reasons for them not to like him, because that's all he's ever known. He's always been kicked out of both his species and by humans because of his appearance. The second aspect I would say that had meaning to Chopper's character in that same arc would have been the meaning of the pirate flag. Dr. Hiraluk referred to that pirate flag as a symbol of faith and the rejection of impossibilities. And it was one of the reasons that kept Dr. Hiraluk going. And obviously, at the end of that arc of Drum Island, we see that Luffy fights for that flag and calls it unbreakable. And that to me would have played a larger part in Fishman Island particularly. Obviously, we see that Chopper did grow past that arc, kind of showcasing more confidence within himself, turning into a monster in order to protect his friends. I do get that, but I feel like Chopper could have stood as someone who could have bridged the gap between humans and non-human species, or someone that represented the triumph over your own oppression, over your own obstacles. A way that Oda could have made Chopper more integral and central to the story of Fishman Island would have been having him split away from the Straw Hats in the beginning of the arc, and then having Chopper be kind of this Brook-like character where he's very popular due to probably being the only mink-like creature that fishmen have seen. So he would have been getting a lot. He would have been admired. He would have been a celebrity, right? At a certain point. This is how I'm kind of imagining it. And then after that, I could definitely see Chopper learning about the history with fishmen and humans, seeing the case of history of slavery, the cycle of hatred that's kind of being passed around in the fisherman community. And I feel like Chopper could have been a figure that would have stood up for humans, right? And it would have been such a drastic change from his introduction arc, where he feared humans, where he wanted to avoid humans. But now on Fishman Island, after having spent time with the Straw Hats and having seen more of the world, he would have tried to convince fishmen by not only detailing his own story and his own experiences with oppression and his own experiences with humans, but he would have been advocating and trying to be a bridge to connect humans and fishmen. If this sounds really out of character for Chopper, since he's kind of this dumb, naive kind of character, I don't really think so. Technically, in the Paramount War, Chopper amended the relationship between large birds and humans. It was called the Torino Kingdom. Torino Kingdom was a nation where the natives, the humans in that island, were being dominated by the large birds, and there was this constant kind of battles and friction between the two groups, right? And that's kind of how Chopper was introduced to the island, where he was nearly killed by a bird, and then once he fell down this large tree, he was being chased down for food by humans. And then after the Paramount War, we see that the two groups are now communicating with each other through Chopper, since Chopper is translating. And the two parties are great now. Like Chopper established kind of an understanding between two groups and peace. Probably the first time ever in the island. But going back to Fishman Island, I feel like another parallel besides Queen Orihime that would have been great for Chopper's character would have been towards Hody Jones. Which sounds a bit crazy since I know he's the main villain and he might have been too strong for Chopper. I don't think that really matters, because when I look at Hody Jones and Chopper as characters, I feel like they're foils of each other. They're complete opposites of one another. Where you have Hody Jones, who really represented the cycle of hatred that was passed down through generations of trauma. Even Hody Jones himself said that he didn't have no negative experience with humans in order to justify his motives, while Chopper did have experience of his own, right? Both characters take pills or drug supplements in order to boost their power. Hody does it for his own gain, for his own benefit, while Chopper becomes a monster in order to protect his friends. I mean, we could go even further, to be honest. Chopper was a victim of being attacked by his own herd and his own species. We see in the same arc, Hody Jones is outright attacking and killing his own members of the Fishman community. I feel like the foundation and the parallels were definitely there for the two characters, and it would have been much more significant for... I feel like that Chopper should have fought Hody Jones. He should have fought Hody Jones. It would have represented a cycle, a fight that would have pertained to a fight of ideals, perspective, and the issue of victim mentality, right? Where you have one character who was a victim of trauma that was passed down generations from generation, and now is kind of hell-bent on getting revenge for something that never happened to him. Whereas you have Chopper, who is a character, has his own experiences that was being discriminated against, and by all means should have hated not only his own species, but humans especially, you know? But he didn't. He triumphed over his oppression. He grew out of it and grew as a person. The reason that I'm advocating so much for the Chopper versus Hody Jones fight is because not only of the parallels it has in of itself, but I feel like that it would have had much more significance in the later scene of the blood transfusion. I wouldn't really change much about the blood transfusion, but I feel like after Chopper having defeated Hody Jones, Luffy still could have, tried to destroy the Noah and everything. I wouldn't change anything about that. But particularly just really Chopper fighting Hody Jones. And then the blood transfusion would still happen as normal. But I feel like it being a scene of just between Luffy and Jinbei, it would have been a scene of Luffy, a human, receiving blood from Jinbei, a fishman. A procedure being done by Chopper, a deer who ate the human devil fruit. And it would have been kind of a unity of all three identities: human, fishman, and animal. I think that message of all three identities kind of uniting together and assisting each other would have been great, right? Fishman, human, animal, that no matter what you are, we're all there for each other and we all could be friends. I think that would have been beautiful. Obviously, it was still kind of done, but just between humans and fishmen. But I would have loved if the animal part of it would have been thrown in, for Chopper especially. Afterwards, the Straw Hats would have given Neptune the Straw Hat flag, obviously. And this time, however, after Chopper having reached out to his community, telling at some point in that story his own flashback, detailing his own experiences and what the pirate flag meant to him, the fisherman community now would have looked at that Straw Hat flag as something unbreakable, as something that was once impossible, right? That flag, the Straw Hat flag, was something that now the fishermen could believe in, have faith in. I honestly found the inspiration for this video not because I'm a Chopper fanboy. I really don't like Chopper. as I've kind of mentioned in the beginning of the video. But there's always this discussion in the community between like, oh, what if Frankie had more of an involvement in the Egghead, which he should have, or Zoro with Wano, these characters that should have had more significance but did not. But I hardly hear anyone ever mention Chopper and his backstory of discrimination and oppression, and how that literally ties to one of the biggest arcs in One Piece, right? Fishman Island. It would have been monumental if Chopper is one of the figures that would have helped Luffy gain Fishman Island as an ally. And I feel like even though it was obviously still done regardless of my theory or my concept, it would have been much more significant for Chopper's character and not just be some kind of merch guy now. Not just be some dude.